All right, it's Tuesday, October 14th. This is an end of the day SPY recap. Today, you can see we ended up with a 3 bar, meaning kind of an inside bar failure from yesterday where we gapped down to the bottom of this big range that I've identified in prior videos. We started up and came back up through the midpoint of that bar and then took out the high of that bar as a target and then sold off a little bit. So it ends up a 3 bar on the daily chart inside a big trading range. And, that means there's no real actionable signal, on any 3 bar in any environment going forward tomorrow. It doesn't mean you can't try to take a trade depending on how, in a minute I'll show you how, things may open and what you can try to do and what might, be a more likely scenario than not. But nevertheless, we're still stuck inside this big red bar range and we're right in the middle of it, at least at the moment. So that, makes it extra tricky to know what develops next. Although, this did close a little green. So if anything else, you kind of expect it maybe to work to the top of the range, but we'll see how opening price action unfolds. It did present an opportunity. I shot a recap video yesterday describing how in this environment I'm looking for opportunities, failures near the bottom of this range, failures near the top of the range, here to go long, up here to go short. And this was a classic example of a gap down, failed near the bottom of this big range, opening price action guided you that way, and then we start moving up again. And this is a good area for those opportunities if everything comes together. And that's what happened today. You can see the market today, after yesterday's inside bar, gapped down big, went down for one red bar, bottom of the range, but then opening price action followed through to the, broke out above bar one. There was an a pre-market target right here to start for follow through. And as it turns out, when you're at the bottom of a big range, we then continued higher all the way up. Once we got to the midpoint of yesterday, we took out that high and then a little sell off at the end. Right below this yellow line is the monthly chart, and that's again something I'm keeping an eye on. Although we're so close to the open now, halfway into the month, there's no real indication that we're going to necessarily strongly go up or reverse to the downside. If we look at the monthly chart, as I described, we had a 2-up month from last month. You expected that with the green bar. That's all we had to do. Then we're starting to come down, but until we get to the midpoint of that bar, below it, which is kind of in line with the bottom of this trading range at the moment, until we get below there, then we still have half a month to go. We can get back to green, and who knows, if you get strong price action, it becomes another green, and you can see each of these green bars that kind of hold the midpoint of the prior month as they head higher. The only difference is a lot of these ones that continue open up there with, early on, and then they continue green all month long. This one actually opened up near the highs and started failing, so that's why it's tricky. But as long, maybe we form, just consolidation here for the rest of the month, and then we get a 2-down month next month. So it's going to be just something to keep an eye on as the month goes on, how this performs. But it's a little different than these green bars, even though maybe we just tested this midpoint here on this big sell-off, took out some liquidity on the daily chart, and down here, these double lows, and then by the end of the month, we have a nice resumption of the trend. That's still possible, and that's kind of what I see right now at the moment, that, since we failed so big at the bottom of the range and moved up pretty strongly, let's see if the price could kind of work to the top of the range in some form, even if we don't break out. There's enough volatility here. In other words, if you bought this here, the SPY at 658 area, got all the way up to 666 almost. So that's a nice, the volatility for intraday gains, even in this choppy, what I'm going to call a trading range choppy environment. But, you have the 3-bar from today. That's no daily signal tomorrow, at least from strat signals here. You'd need either kind of like a 2 up and a 2 down inside this big range, or you need an inside bar tomorrow and then some kind of breakout. We also have a 3-bar from last week, so that means all this whole week while we're inside of it, there's no real actionable signal here at that time frame. So we're just kind of going day by day here and looking more for failures within this area. Those are kind of the opportunities. But nevertheless, tomorrow, let's just say here's this green bar. You almost, just because it's green, you kind of think you should probe that high to maybe to the top of the range. So we'll see, how opening price action unfolds. Let's say, for example, there's a pre-market range here. Let me So do you have a line on here? Let me just grab one more line and draw just as an example of what may happen to it. Let's say you get some kind of pre-market range here, opening 15-minute bar opens above that and then follows through higher. You could take that trade, see, if you take out yesterday's high, and then at that point, at that inflection point, what happens there, and can we start working up to the top of this range? But if we kind of make a push up, for example, then a pause and a secondary push fails, that could be an early entry sign to try to buy puts and see if we, kind of bounce around in this range. That's what's developing right here, in my opinion. Also, same thing, if we come to the downside tomorrow, let's say that's the pre-market range between the blue lines, we'll have to see where it is and kind of go maybe only to the midpoint of that bar. This is pretty strong buying down here at the bottom of this range. So if we have like a failure in the morning, red down here, and then it comes back up through the first 15-minute bar, maybe you can treat that as a buy signal and see if, it starts to probe the high. So we're going to see what happens on a daily basis relative to the high, this 3 bar here, the high and the low, because we have to get out of that. That's like broadening action on a very short time frame, lower lows, higher highs, and we're now right in the middle of that. So any buys tomorrow inside of here, it's not actionable as to that it has to reach these levels. If anything, it's the day after tomorrow that's going to start, once again, at least giving daily type signals to look, for certain targets depending on how things open and everything else. So tomorrow, you're just kind of playing the opening range. I don't know if we're going to gap up big. If we gap up big, there could be failures up here. If we gap down big, I would think that's a better opportunity. Or again, like today, look for a red to green kind of move. So that's kind of the thinking at this point. But there's also, the mentality just to stay away from these markets until things become a little more clearer, although, there are opportunities. And again, I described yesterday's video that to me, the best opportunities were going to be failures down here at the bottom that move up and failures at the top that move down. So maybe, that's why since we did fail here and start up and close green, there could be some follow through to the top of the range that I would more or less expect within this environment, but it doesn't mean it's an actionable signal. But if opening price action looks, like today, like a good, type of, let's say it consolidates, then breaks out and starts heading up to the top of the range, that could be a good trade with some nice volatility in here. But keep in mind, we have to still get out of this big red bar in some form. It's going to take time. The weekly chart's going to take time before it reveals where it wants to go. We're right near the open of the month here. If you look at the daily chart and spread it out, the month so far kind of took out the high of the previous month, and we've come down. But we're now trying to get back to the open, hold the midpoint of the prior month, and maybe just continue green, on the monthly chart as well. So we haven't really broken through the midpoint to the downside there. That only happens if you break out of this red bar. So it's a lot of, commentary, but, it's still clear to me kind of what's developing, and it's still clear that it's, an inside environment here, and therefore failures in some form become some of the better opportunities. If you're going to play a little momentum, or within this range, then kind of be nimble about it. You really need to see the follow through. If we're going to go up, then let's see if we get immediate follow through on that 15-minute chart towards the top of the range. If not, then be careful. And the failures at this, until proven otherwise, still I think the best trades happen up here with failures and down here with failures. So let's see what unfolds tomorrow and for the rest of the week.